Hello, everyone. Good evening. It is just shortly after 7 o'clock. We have quorum, so I'm recalling this meeting of council to order. Welcome to everyone in the gallery and to those folks watching from home. Just a reminder, those of you at home on this snowy evening, that you can watch this on live stream. You can watch it on the YouTube channel after the fact, or you can watch it on Tell-Il, which is available for the next week or so. I'll begin by acknowledging that we are gathered here today in Unama'ki, the land of the fog, a part of Mi'kma'ki, the unceded traditional territory of the Mi'kmaq people since time immemorial. We honor and thank the Mi'kmaq for sharing their land and home with us. So we'll move on to O Canada. Please stand if you're able for the playing of our national anthem.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command.
Car ton bras s'est porté l'épée, il s'est porté la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée des plus brillants exploits. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
I'll ask the CAO now to do the roll call of councillors.
Thank you, Madam Chair. District 1, Councillor Sean Sampson. Present. Thank you. District 2, Warden Lois Landry.
Present.
Thank you. District 3, Councillor Brian Marchand.
Present.
Thank you. District 4, Councillor Amanda Bombercat.
Present.
And thank you. And District 5, Deputy Warden Brent Sampson. Present. The roll has been called, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. You have the agenda in front of you. It was circulated last week. Are there any additions to the agenda as circulated pursuant to our procedural policy? Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion to approve the agenda as circulated. Moved by by Councillor Sampson. Can I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Mumbercat. So the motion on the floor to approve the agenda as circulated. No discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? That motion is carried. The review of the minutes for those folks following along, those are on page 4 all the way to page 14 in your package. So that meeting took place on December 16th, 2024. You've had a chance to review them. Any errors or omissions to the minutes as circulated? Councillor Mumbercat?
Thank you. So I just would maybe make
Mike.
a recommendation.
Look at me forgetting to use the microphone. I would just maybe make a recommendation that we remove the phonetic pronunciation of Unama'ki and Mi'kma'ki from our minutes for future, because the correct spellings are there already.
So there's been a note and it was read, and so there's not needed to have the phonetics as something that was read.
Why? Because they're already correctly spelled.
They're
It's
correctly
redundant.
spelled, yeah. We don't do it for any other words, and
Right.
they're words we use commonly, I think, at this
Yeah.
point. There is a motion, there is no motion on the floor, so there's been a recommendation to remove that. So I'm looking for a mover to second, are there any other errors or omissions in the minutes before I move on? Okay, so I'll ask for a motion to approve with those two amendments, those two clarifications or edits.
I'll make the motion.
Moved by Councillor Mumbercat. We have a seconder. Seconded by Councillor Sampson, that the meeting minutes of December 16th be adopted as circulated with the two phonetic spellings removed. Discussion on that? Hearing none, I'll ask for a vote to be taken. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion is carried. Question period. We're now going to open it up for a 10-minute question period. We'll take those from the gallery, but we'll also take them by phone. So if you're watching from home, it's 226-9885, and there is a bit of a delay, so we'll wait a minute. And a reminder, this is to committee reports, and I think it's worth saying again, the reason this question period was moved before committee reports is that we will be hearing motions from the committee reports that we will vote on. So if the public has anything they'd like to ask us before we choose how to vote on those motions, this is that opportunity. It always catches me off guard how long it takes for someone to get through. Yeah, okay. Okay, so we will move on. We're looking now at committee reports. So we have 4 committee reports this evening to review. The first will be the Committee of the Whole report. So I'm going to turn it over to Deputy Warden Brent Sampson for the Committee of the Whole report.
Committee of the Whole report, January 2025. The committee met on January 14th, 2025. The committee discussed the financial documents received from Destination Cape Breton Association. I move that Council accept the recommendation of the Committee of the Whole and direct the CAO to speak with the CEO and/or Board of Destination Cape Breton Association to allow Richmond County Council to release the financials without the confidentiality component.
Mover, can we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Marchand. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries.
The committee discussed the proclamation request from Jennifer Enright of the Canadian Amyloidosis Support Network. I move that Council accept the recommendation of the Committee of the Whole and approve the proclamation to proclaim March 2025 as Amyloidosis Awareness Month in Richmond County.
Motion on the floor, can we have a second? Seconded by Councillor Sampson to adopt the, proclamation. Any questions? All those in favor of the motion on the floor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries, and before Deputy Warden carries on, I will read the proclamation for the record. For reasons included in the attached proclamation documentation, which you can find on page 16, I believe. Therefore, be it resolved that I, Warden Lois Landry, on behalf of Richmond County Municipal Council, do hereby proclaim March 2025 as Amyloidosis Awareness Month in the Municipality of the County of Richmond. Back over to you.
The committee discussed the grant request from the Isle Madame New Horizons Senior Citizens Club for the infrastructure grant funds in the amount of $5,000. I move that Council accept the recommendation of the Committee of the Whole and approve the grant request from the Isle Madame New Horizons Senior Citizens Club for the infrastructure grant funds in the amount of $5,000 and be allocated as follows: $750 from District 1 funds, $750 from District 2 funds, and $3,500 from the infrastructure grant funds.
Motion on the floor. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Sampson to grant the infrastructure funds a total amount of $5,000 as outlined. Do we have any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? That motion carries.
The committee discussed the grant request from the Richmond Boxing Club for the Type 4 Regional Health General Grant Funds in the amount of $10,000. I move that the council accept the recommendation of the Committee of the Whole and approve the grant request from the Richmond Boxing Club for the Type 4 Regional Health General Grant Funds in the amount of $10,000 and be allocated as follows: $500 from District 4 funds, $2,000 from District 5 funds, and $7,500 from the regional funds.
Boxing Club, Type 4 grant. Can I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Mumbercat. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none. All those in favor of providing the grant in the dollar amounts listed there signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? That motion carries.
This concludes the Committee of the Whole report for the month of January 2025, and I move its adoption.
Motion on the floor to accept the Committee of the Whole report. We have a seconded by Councillor Marchand. Any concerns? No? Hearing none. All those in favor of accepting the Committee of the Whole report as provided signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? That motion carries. And so the Committee of the Whole report is adopted and the motions included pass. So moving on now to the Bylaw and Policy Committee report for December of 2024. I'll again turn it over to Deputy Warden Sampson.
Bylaw Policy Committee report, January 2025. The committee met on January 14th, 2025. The committee discussed the readoption of the travel and expense policy. I move that Council accept the recommendation of the Bylaw Policy Committee and readopt the travel and expense policy.
Motion on the floor to readopt the travel and expense policy. Do we have a seconder? Sorry, I missed that. Seconded by Councillor Marchand. Thank you. Any discussion on the motion? I would like to offer up for those folks who are listening that you'll notice our travel and expense policy and our hospitality and expense policy are being readopted without any changes. That is because there is a provision in the Municipal Government Act, Section 23, subsection 7, which requires that during an election season, by January 31st following a municipal election, you have to either readopt or make changes and adopt those changes. So this is a MGA requirement. So any other concerns? No, hearing none. Motion on the floor to readopt the travel and expense policy. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Contrary minded? That motion passes.
The committee discussed the readoption of the hospitality expense policy. I move that Council accept the recommendation of the Bylaw Policy Committee and readopt the hospitality expense policy.
Moved and seconded to readopt the the hospitality expense policy. And again, same reason, it is the same provision in the Municipal Government Act that requires us to readopt that. So all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? That motion carries.
The committee discussed the inclusive, diverse, equitable, accessible IDEA committee terms of reference. I move that Council accept the recommendation of the Bylaw Policy Committee and adopt the IDEA Committee terms of reference as presented with the changes to sections 3.1 and 3.10 as discussed.
Moved and seconded by Councillor Marchand to adopt the IDEA terms of reference. By way of discussion, I'll just offer that the matrix will be changed to reflect that, and that is already, the positions for the IDEA Committee would be 2 additional vacancies, and those are already posted. So there is a motion on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? That motion carries, and at this point, I'll give Deputy Warden Sampson a chance to catch his breath, because we're having just a minute of technical difficulties, and so our technician has asked for just a minute to make sure that we're actually getting our stream live. I don't think we need to go into recess. We'll just sit for a minute. It's a short-term thing. 2 minutes, he said.
That's not my area. Glad you moved your water cooler because I have an identical water cooler. If you had put it over me, I would have taken a gulp of it, so.
Wouldn't have killed it, maybe. Those are pretty good. Were you allowed to say something?
Yes, well, sure.
I talked to the farmer's pantry, because you said there was no head counts. Jennifer thought there were 40 people there.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, she
Yeah.
counted the seats and then estimated how many
Good.
people were standing.
Yeah, that I had, yeah, okay, great. Yeah, I did head counts at the other places, but I didn't. Good.
So we are recording, of course, but it's not live stream.
Oh,
So it'll be up as of tomorrow.
okay. Do we
Or
have
go
a,
later tonight. It's just we can't live stream.
sure, do we have a way to push that out on our website? On our Facebook post?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
We could just Facebook, yeah, now, so that, okay, and so we're back, and, sort of. So, if you are watching this, it is clear to us that you are watching it as a recording. So, unfortunately, for reasons beyond our control, we are not able to live stream tonight, so apologies to folks at home who may have wanted to participate in the meeting. But we are going to move on. So we are in the middle of the Bylaw and Policy Committee. And Deputy Warden?
The committee discussed the grant policy to clarify eligibility versus asset ownership. The committee reached a consensus to refer the Holy Guardian Angels Parish and Whiteside Church Preservation Society grant requests to Council for consideration. Holy Guardian Angels Parish Grant Request Type 1, Infrastructure Grant Funds in the amount of $5,000, application attached, as well as the Whiteside Church Preservation Society Grant Request for the Type 1 Infrastructure Grant Funds in the amount of $5,000 with the application attached as well.
I just want to offer a clarification on how we got here, and just so we're also clear on any conflict of interests if we need to have any declarations of such. So staff will bring completed grant applications to council, and that is found in our committee of the whole or council under correspondence. But you'll notice that it is not in correspondence. This is in the Bylaw and Policy Committee. So an application was deemed incomplete by staff. But at my request, as an agenda item, I brought it to the Bylaw and Policy Committee to see if information provided by the applicant, which is included in the package that we've posted online, would help meet criteria in our policy. Was consensus among the Bylaw and Policy Committee that it did not. So staff were correct in their interpretation that the application was not complete because despite the information presented. But there was consensus at that meeting to bring it to council to consider as part of a exception to policy, which is in our purview. So there are two separate items for us to consider. Is there any issue that anybody wants to declare? So you're good to stay?
We're not deciding on
This is to do with the bylaw policy.
Yes.
Bringing it to the meeting.
Yeah, it's just depending on how far you want to declare that on
It was in that meeting.
your, yeah.
Right, but are we looking,
The grants,
We're not approving the grants.
Just doing the.
but we
report at
can, we
this time.
could do it within, we could do it now, could we not? Because, no, so you want to do the committee, the approval of the adoption of the committee meeting minutes?
they're not even on the meeting.
Yeah, if you don't do it now, they're not on the agenda.
They're not anywhere else. We said we would do it as, it's not a motion, but this is where we're bringing it up, I believe. Yep.
Unless you just want to second this motion, pass it, and then have a motion on the
Yeah,
grants.
then a second motion could
Yeah,
happen.
because I think you gotta go
This is
through
just a
each
motion to
individual.
bring it to this meeting,
Yeah.
but it is not on the agenda.
Right, so I guess because it's not elsewhere on the agenda, I'm thinking it would happen
Under new
here.
business, or wherever.
Or it doesn't happen.
Yeah, well, we never had it
So, but what could happen right now, sorry, Warden, if that's okay. Thank you. So procedurally, I think what we could do is continue to agree, or to pass the motion as the Deputy Warden's presented it. But then we could use our council prerogative to make an additional motion for each of the items that are listed there. We certainly can introduce an additional motion following the conclusion of the Bylaw and Policy Committee report.
Just view this
Yeah.
as, to bring each of them to the meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it could occur during the discussion on Bylaw and Policy Committee too. So I'm thinking procedurally we could do that. That's how I would handle it. Okay.
So we are specifically looking to, the discussion of the Bylaw and Policy Committee is to bring this to council for consideration. So we implied in that decision is that we are going to consider it here tonight at this meeting. So what we vote is still to be determined, but it is our wishes and the wishes of the Bylaw and Policy Committee that it be brought up at this meeting. So my original thinking was that it would be brought up within this meeting minutes, but we can approve the Bylaw and Policy Committee report, and then after that adoption.
Okay. Thank you, Warden. I think all we're saying with this is we're going to bring it to council. We didn't say when. Doesn't mean it's coming tonight. We did discuss, but I mean, the motion is just grant request to council for consideration. It's not saying when. I think our intent was this one, but.
In fact, we did discuss the idea that specifically this evening, it was absolutely discussed because we talked originally about bringing it to the next Committee of the Whole meeting, but bringing it at the Committee of the Whole meant that there was no decision until the end of February, and the quote regarding the pricing is a serious concern. So it absolutely was the sentiment at the meeting. The decision was to bring it up at council, this council meeting. Go ahead, Councillor Membercap.
Thank you, Warden. So just to, because I think Councillor Marchand is correct in that the written motion doesn't include that. Pardon me?
That's not clear.
Yeah, it doesn't say the date in it. But at the Bylaw and Policy Committee meeting, I do recall clearly that discussion as well. So did we have a seconder on that original?
So we could have Councillor Deputy Warden Sampson move the adoption. We could, as part of that voting process, ask for an amendment to the policy and committee report, which stipulates at this council meeting. So we can do that if those are the wishes of council. But do I have an understanding here that once we conclude and adopt this report, that we will go into a discussion about those two proposals? No matter what we decide is still to be determined. But we'd made a commitment to our group that we would consider it at this meeting. And each one individually. So we're good with, we can absolutely make an amendment to the adoption of the committee report to include that change, because that is a reflection of what happened at that meeting.
And was the intent.
And was the intent.
So has that?
So, we did not. So would you like to make so did you read that sentence? This concludes?
No.
Okay, so
We're not on the conclusion, we didn't even.
Yeah, we didn't second. This last motion.
okay. So we have a motion on the floor to to adopt the bylaw.
No, I read the committee reached a consensus to. So there's no motion. Yeah, that's true, actually.
Right, so Councillor or Deputy Warden Sampson, are you looking to move?
Yeah, well,
I could be incorrect in this, but I'm thinking maybe that you say that committee reach a consensus to refer that tonight. So if that's the case, then you could start on one, then the other, and I could recuse myself now. Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I believe.
Okay. Yeah.
I believe
So
that we can do
I'll-
motions within a committee report.
Yeah, so I'll recuse myself from the first of the two items, simply because we had a quote on one of them, so, yeah.
Great. So, again, based on the discussion that happened at the Bylaw and Policy Committee meeting, it was agreed by consensus that we would bring the two to this meeting for discussion. So the first one, Deputy Warden Sampson put a quote in, and so he is stepping out, but he'll come back for the second one, just by way of clarification, because he wasn't involved in quotes for that. So the first one we have to deal with is Holy Guardian Angels Parish has put in a request for Type 1 infrastructure grant funds in the amount of $5,000. The application is attached. There is quite a bit of documentation about how the hall is held in trust, but to be clear, that does not meet the criteria for lease or own. So we would be looking at this as an exception to policy. So I would open the floor to any motions, if anybody is interested, to bring us to some sort of decision on this. Councillor Marquette.
Okay, thank you, Warden. So I'd like to make a motion so that we can put this on the floor and have it discussed. So I will make the motion to award
Did you, keep pushing it, it's going to keep, so are you?
No.
You didn't want to say, just don't touch anything, then it'll go off. Okay. So there is a motion on the floor to award the $1,500 from the District 5 fund. Do we have a seconder on that motion?
I'll second that motion.
So we have a seconder and a mover to award $1,500 from the District 5 fund for the Holy Guardian Angel Parish. Is there any discussion on that motion? Sure, go ahead.
Thank you, Warden. And yeah, I do want to commend the committee for providing that additional information on the Episcopal Corporation, which is registered or, I guess recognized through legislation, and the additional information that they provided saying that was, clearly noting that properties granted and owned would belong to that Episcopal Corporation, which is, includes members of the community representing it. So to me, that went a little ways further to satisfying that, discussion around ownership. And let's be clear, we have some sort of agreement with them as a comfort center. They provided a great deal of information. We know how much that hall is used. However, I also kind of recognize that, we're both lit up tonight. There you go. Also recognize that if we start to go down that road, I do worry about setting a precedent, right? Because, because of the volume and the volume of these types of assets that we are blessed with in Richmond County. That being said, again, because of the documentation they were able to provide, I would kind of be more leaning in favor. And I praised the motion as an offer of $1,500 because I wanted to get the discussion started on the table, and I feel strongly that Councillor, Deputy Warden would be supportive of that, but certainly would be, open to entertaining an amendment if people thought the organization, number one, was eligible enough that we could make this exception, and two, if they wanted to change the amount. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. We're hoping that everybody's being recorded at this point. But so is there any other discussion on the motion? And again, just a reminder, the motion on the floor is for $1,500 from the District 5 funds. Councillor Marchand, you have a...
Yeah. The package I have doesn't have the registry of joint stocks for that organization. I don't know. The one that was printed for me doesn't have it. So was it provided?
It's the legislation, right? Copy of the legislation.
But is this organization, we ask others to provide that. It's very clear the infrastructure grant, you need ownership or a lease. They have none of those. They do not own it. The letter that was provided to the Department of Communities, Culture, and Heritage, at the very last sentence, Kathy Farrell says, "We thank you for your time and look forward to a positive response to our grant application." We just passed or accepted a grant from the boxing club who are doing a roof, which is infrastructure. We allowed them to do it under general. They don't have to provide ownership. They did. So what I would suggest for this grant, either we get the Episcopal Corporation to apply for it. In our policy, we do have the ability for organizations out of the county to apply as long as they're doing something good for the county. So Kathy's very clear there, our grant application. So they own it. So we could get them to do it, or we could ask this organization to apply under general, because we just set the precedent that even though it's infrastructure, we allowed it to go under general. So I'm not prepared to support this, and I believe the next one after is owned as well by the same corporation. So I think maybe we should direct both of those groups to apply a different way, get someone to apply other than the organizations that use these facilities, get the owner to apply, and or get them to apply under general. Thank you, Warden.
Thank you. So yes, there is a grant type 1, which is for infrastructure. There is a grant type 4, that's what you're referring to, which is
Yes.
health.
Regional general.
Right. So.
And I don't agree that a roof should go under that at all. But we just passed a motion for the boxing club. It gives them the ability to get more. That's obviously why they went through it, because they could provide us proof that they own the building. They did provide it.
Actually, to be fair, I believe part of why they needed to go to the type 4 had also to do with the fact that you are expected to be able to match funds in, and they just didn't have that because
Yes.
they are a brand-new organization. So to be fair, that was the driving force behind going to District 4, the type 4. So,
Driving force or not, I mean, the
Yep, so
policy is the
fair enough.
policy,
Yep, good.
and we're not following it.
oh, absolutely, we are not. This is an exception to policy. So we would be doing this as an exception to policy.
I see
So
my light is
Deputy,
on. I don't know if I'm
Council,
on.
sorry, go ahead.
The lights are on, but if we allow this to go, the organizations that were refused because they started work, they need to be able to come back, and we grant them money. You can't, it's not prioritizing what sections in the guidelines of the grants are more important than others. So if we're not allowing some grants on parts of that, we need to do it for all. And we definitely need to change the policy.
So
I
to
can't
be,
get that off.
yeah, I don't know whose lights are on. We're just going to hope for the best. So to be clear, there have been other people whose applications could not be considered because they started work before they did the application. That's not the case in this application. They were very careful not to have any invoices. That's not an issue. We have had exceptions in the past, and I believe taking from district funds aligns with exceptions in the past. So I see that so in fact, this is consistent with other exceptions to policy that have been made. I'm seeing head nodding over here. So I went back to something in 2023. It was a similar situation, I believe in District 5, but it was strictly from district funds and regional funds weren't. So I believe that exceptions to policy are within the purview of council, and I think council is responsible to make sure that their exceptions make sense and line up with each other. So we've heard from not Deputy Warden, he's left because of a conflict, but we know that he's okay with the 1,500. There's been a motion and a seconder and comments and discussion. Is there any other discussion on the motion?
Yes, Warden, you are correct when it comes to, in the past, us taking from our district funds. So that is correct. In the past, we have taken from District 1 and District 2 here in Almadam for a metal roof in Peregrine, the church in Peregrine. And the question of ownership was also in play in that situation. So we just left that as a district fund. And, that's the councillors in question supporting the parishioners that are doing their best to keep these churches open, right? So I'm fully in support of Mr. Deputy Warden's request for his 1,500. So.
Thank you. And I do want to Councillor Marchand's point, I believe that each councillor, one not here, but we have agreed by consensus that the grant policy needs to be revisited. So I think we are all very much in favor of revisiting that. And it is, and we are expecting to do that either in February or March for an April 1st start in the next fiscal year. So we are very committed to making that change, to Councillor Marchand's point. So is there any new information to provide to this discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote on the motion. So to be clear, the vote is to provide the Holy Guardian Angels Parish $1,500 from the District 5 district funds. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed? The vote passes, and so we can call Deputy Warden Sampson back in. Claire, do you want to? So again, just a reminder, Deputy Warden Sampson was in conflict for one of the proposals, but not the other. And so for those of you following along at home, we are now moving on to the next one, which is the Whiteside Church Preservation Society grant for the Type 1 infrastructure funds in the amount of $5,000. So you see that in your package beginning somewhere, page, quite far along there. Anybody have any discussion they would like to, or motion they'd like to move us along so that we can figure out, have a starting point for this discussion or not?
I just want to ask, did we only give 1,500 to that last grant?
Yes.
Okay.
Only from District 3 funds.
Okay. Well, if it's District 3, it's okay. So, I don't know if I'm on there, my light's on, but, so the next grant falls into the same situation as the previous grant. We are violating the policy by giving district funds. I don't know if there's a timeline on this one as well. There's only one quote with it. I'm thinking maybe we should inform this group to just come back, because if they apply under the Episcopal Corporation, I think they're eligible to get the 5,000 infrastructure. If they apply under the general, they're potential able to get more. So since it is in my district, I'm not going to make any motion for it right now. I will speak to the people that have sent it and ask them what they want to do. I didn't get the impression that there was a timeline here with this one, since it is restorative work. It wasn't a roof. So I won't make any motion for it right now, and I'll speak to these people and maybe give them a little bit of direction. I don't know if I'm giving them the wrong direction to apply under the Episcopal Corporation or to apply under the Type 4.
So we'll ask the CAO to maybe offer some comments.
Sure, by all means. Please ask them to work with Danielle and the staff here as well as they explore those, so we help keep them on the right track for it. And also, I would direct all councillors to look at your Type 4 funds. It is getting, type 1 and type 4 is getting used up very quick for this fiscal. There is not a whole lot left in there. So district funds are going to be needed as well as the type 1, type 4 to make some of these things happen, even more so when we get into next month's grant applications, because there's 4 or 5 more coming at us.
Yeah, well.
Councillor Marchand, can I also ask that you maybe ask them for some clarification around viable quotes for restoration work? So I think one of the concerns may be that the kind of people who can do restoration work may be very limited, and that is something that perhaps might help to, or, articulate some of the concerns.
I think in their proposal, they had a letter there and they spoke of the Lewisburg group. So there was only probably 2 people. And I think the Lewisburg group moved them on to the Sherbrooke group. So that's probably the reason. But I will speak to them more about it. Yeah. And
Okay, so we'll defer that as needed, pending Councillor Marchand's discussion. So we now have concluded all matters.
can I just make a comment in reference to the previous one? Are we going to get them to reapply as well, or are they going to go ahead? Because they could reapply under the infrastructure. They do want 5,000. I mean, their finances aren't, all the parishes aren't in the best of state, so should we make them apply as well?
I think we would encourage any group that came here to meet with our staff person, Danielle Martel, anytime they don't get what they had hoped for, anytime they have needs that are not met by their own funds. I think we should, as a matter of practice, always ask those groups to meet with staff to see if there are any other options. And maybe, despite an initial conflict, perhaps the councillor for District 5 could make that kind of start having that conversation.
Yeah, I think it was pretty clear, though, from the beginning there was a time issue, so that doesn't really make any sense here. Yeah.
Councillor Marchand, would you be prepared to make a motion to defer the Whiteside preservation so that we have an action item to bring it to another meeting?
Okay. I'll make a motion that we defer the Whiteside Church Preservation Society grant request for type 1 to our next committee of the whole meeting.
Perfect. That's a mover. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Sampson. I say that's a good amount of discussion on that topic. So all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carried. So I will ask.
I think I cut your...
Whatever. I will ask now that Deputy Warden Sampson close out our Bylaw and Policy Committee meeting.
This concludes the Bylaw Policy Committee report for January 2025, and I move its adoption.
We have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Marchand. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Contrary-minded. That motion is carried, and the Bylaw Policy Committee report for January 2025 is adopted. So now we are moving on to the Inclusive, Diverse, Equitable, and Accessible Committee report, committee often referred to by the acronym IDEA. So Councillor Umbercat is the chair of that committee, and so she will provide us with the report.
Okay, thank you, Warden. The committee met on December 17th, 2024. The committee discussed the role of caregivers who participate on the Inclusive, Diverse, Equitable, Accessible Advisory Committee. I move that the Council accept the recommendation of the Inclusive, Diverse, Equitable, Accessible Advisory Committee and have the Warden prepare a letter addressed to the Nova Scotia Directorate requesting clarification on the role of caregivers who are members of an Accessibility Advisory Committee, and further move that a copy of the letter be sent to Inclusion Nova Scotia.
Motion on the table to write that letter, seconded by Councillor Marchand. Any discussion on that motion? Go ahead, Councillor.
Yeah, just a little more clarification, I guess, on the fact of caregivers. Now, it seems like caregivers who are members of this. Do you mean just the members of the committee, or can somebody explain that to me?
So So in the terms of reference which come from the Accessibility Act, it talks about first voice needing to be a part of the committee, and first voice is defined in the Accessibility Act as those who have a disability or represent an organization that represents, is on a part of an organization that represents people with disabilities. But I have spoken to people who have been involved in the actual writing of the Accessibility Act, and what they said was it was always intended that family members who had to speak for someone who could not speak for themselves could be considered among that group of people that would qualify for first voice.
Or caregivers who aren't family.
Sure, that's right. It could be caregivers, yeah. Yeah. So that's what this is to ask for some clarification and specifically send that also to Inclusion Nova Scotia, which represents.
It's just saying caregivers who are members of an accessibility, and I thought the issue with this was to get caregivers onto this committee.
Who are members of the Accessibility Advisory Committee.
So can I?
Go ahead.
Okay, so you're correct. We are looking to attract caregivers to the committee. The reason we're asking for clarification on the role of caregivers who are members of the committee is because we want to know if they meet the threshold of first voice as outlined. So once we know that they do meet the threshold, then we'll be able to communicate that to the public more clearly to attract members.
So as it stands now, I as a caregiver, I'm on. As it stands now, I as a caregiver could certainly be on this committee, but I would not, as of this moment, qualify as one of the people who represent First Voice. So it is about making sure that caregivers on this committee can be included in the number of people. So there is a small semantics issue, but it is about being able to be counted as First Voice.
Do we have members on the committee that are caregivers but not First Voice?
Yes.
Okay. So I kind of got the impression when we spoke about it before, we were looking to have caregivers who weren't First Voice to be able to be members, but you already have that.
Yes.
So you just want to make sure that we're okay with doing what we're doing. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so motion on the floor, and it has been moved and seconded. So any other discussion on that motion? No? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? That motion carries.
This concludes the Inclusive, Diverse, Equitable, Accessible Advisory Committee report for the month of January 2025, and I move its adoption.
Thank you, Councillor Mumbercat. Motion to adopt the IDEA report, seconded by Councillor Marchand. Any discussion on that motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries, and the IDEA report for January 2025 is adopted. Moving on now to the RCMP Advisory Board report. If you're following along on your package, it is page 68. I am going to call on Councillor Sean Sampson, who chairs, am I right, you chair? Yep. Yeah, the RCMP Advisory Board, to provide us with that report. So over to you.
Thank you, Madam Warden. So the RCMP Advisory Board report for December 2024. The RCMP Advisory Board met on December 18th, 2024. The RCMP Advisory Board discussed the request from Sergeant Mike Lidstone to place Crime Stopper decals at appropriate locations in Richmond County. I move that Council accept the recommendation of the RCMP Advisory Board and approve the request from Sergeant Mike Lidstone to display Crime Stopper decals throughout Richmond County, and further move to refer to staff for installation and determining the appropriate locations.
There's a motion on the floor, seconded by Deputy Warden Sampson, to display Crime Stopper decals and refer to staff for installation. Is there a mover and seconder? Do we have any discussion on that motion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed? Motion carried. Carry on.
Thank you. The RCMP Advisory Board discussed Sergeant Brad Kelly's initiative to organize a town hall meeting with residents and local law enforcement. I move that council accept the recommendation of the RCMP Advisory Board and support Sergeant Brad Kelly's initiative to organize a town hall meeting with residents and local law enforcement.
Moved by Councillor Sampson and seconded by Councillor Marchand that council adopt the recommendation to organize a town hall meeting with residents and local law enforcement. So the mover and seconder, any discussion on that motion? Yes, go ahead.
Can I ask Councillor Sampson, where was the intention of having these meetings? That's selected yet? These town hall meetings?
The locations?
Yeah.
I assume they would have been waiting for a motion from council here to kind of.
Not selected.
Yeah. Okay. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion on the floor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? That motion carries.
This concludes the RCMP Advisory Board report for December 2024, and I move its adoption.
Moved by Councillor Sampson, seconded by Deputy Warden Sampson, that the RCMP Advisory Board report for December of 2024 be adopted. Any concerns, questions, queries? None. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed? Motion carried. So we will now move on to, I just want to stop and apologize to the public. These lights, nothing seems to be working with these lights. So if there are times where we've been talking and you haven't been able to hear us, many apologies. So we are going to move on to item number 10, which is new business of councillors' items. So Councillor Amanda Mumbercat has provided memorandum for our consideration, and it is included in your packages on page, starting on page 69. And it is information regarding the River Tillard to St. Peter's 3-kilometer trail. So I'll give Councillor Mumbercat an opportunity to perhaps make a motion or speak to this issue.
Thank you, Warden. Okay, so I've provided a pretty full scope memo on the matter. I won't read the whole thing. I'll spare you that pain. But I do want to highlight a couple of pieces because I think there are some important key messages from the information that I provided. It talks about specifically this. So the trail system we're talking about is the 3 kilometers of trail. It's approximately 3 kilometers of the rail bed from River Tillard to the village. And bringing it up to a standard that will enable it for use by, I affectionately have called it wheels and heels. So for pedestrians, for, ATV users, for horses, for whatever the case may be, right? Very specifically, the trail is owned by the provincial government, and the ATV group, the East Richmond Riders, were looking for a letter of authority to upgrade and manage it. I recognize that the St. Peter's Community Club has also put in a request for a letter of authority for that same section of trail for a specific purpose for pedestrians. Now, what I can tell you from, doing my research into this over the last number of years is that the ATV riders are modeling their efforts based on the Celtic Shores Coastal Trail, which also uses the rail bed in Inverness County. The nature of rail beds, abandoned rail corridors like that, is that they're well suited to becoming multi-use trails because of the foundation that exists. So more particularly well suited than, say, a trail through a different type of area that was never sort of upgraded to that foundation. So, originally that corridor was designed for motorized use, which was a rail car, right? But certainly since then, it is, it's an unmaintained trail. It's considered by the province an abandoned rail corridor, and it's not got a maintenance mandate from anyone at this point. No letter of authority for either group has been approved, and the Department of Natural Resources does not have a mandate right now to upgrade it or to maintain it even. I do want to recognize at this point, though, that there is a particular sensitivity around the term abandoned rail corridor. Because, of course, as community members, we know that people use this trail. It is not abandoned by the people of our community or our county. It is simply a provincial classification, which means that it doesn't get any consistent funding or service or maintenance. So, to me, the status quo is not. It's not acceptable because last year we nearly, over the last number of years, we nearly lost the trail to the ocean. It still is at risk if there's not some really aggressive maintenance and upgrade planned. I will also clearly state that in order to be brought up to a multi-use standard, I feel very strongly that we wouldn't just encourage ATVs on the grassy areas. The rail, the bed itself, the surface of the trail would need to be upgraded to the standard that we see in other areas, not just along Inverness County, but the remainder of the rail bed from River Tillard up through to Lewisdale. And I understand now the provincial government has recently passed some legislation and approved road trails, sharing the road access to allow people from that Lewisdale head of that trail over across to Lennox Passage, which effectively connects the bigger part of the county, which is, I think, a great step forward. Still some work to be done on connecting to the eastern end because, of course, now we got the canal bridge to deal with, but, hopefully that can be addressed. But in my vision for this trail, not just this 3 kilometers, it is that it becomes a part of a wider trail network that is multi-use, a backbone that will connect our village to our island, to eventually trails on the western side, and trails, I should note, of course, also to the northeast of us from the Isle Royale Trail Club as well. So, that is the goal. It's become, in many other areas, something that supports a 12-month-of-the-year tourism economy, which directly connects with our trail strategy and our strategic plan.
So can I interrupt at this point? Can I ask you, if you are interested in doing so, to perhaps make a motion that would allow us to continue this as debate as part of a motion? So we've heard that, we have the information. If we could get a motion, I would look for a seconder who would be open to seconding by way of encouraging more discussion, and we'll come back to you to provide any points you might have missed.
Thank you, Warden. So yes, so given that Municipal Council has in the past supported the multi-use access for this trail via a letter that was provided in 2021, which I've provided a copy of. So given that previous support, what I'm asking, what I would do is now make a motion to reaffirm Council support for the province to issue the East Richmond ATV riders a letter of authority to assume management of the trail and to encourage, further move to encourage trail users to work together on accessible and reasonable solutions for everyone.
So I will reread that.
Okay.
Just so the motion is, Councillor Mumbercat moves to reaffirm Council support for the province to issue the East Richmond ATV riders letter of authority to assume management of the trail and to encourage trail users to work together on accessible and reasonable solutions. Do we have anybody to second that motion? Sure. And it's actually in bold on page 70 of your package, but it is to reaffirm Council's support for the province to issue the East Richmond ATV riders a letter of authority to assume management of the trail and to encourage trail users to work together on accessible and reasonable solutions. So I wonder if we might entertain the thought of putting the words and further move to encourage trail users.
Brent seconded, sorry, I was just looking.
Oh, yes.
Seconder, sorry. Didn't mean to interrupt.
So can I, it hasn't gone out yet, has it? It has, yeah, okay. So currently it says, reaffirm council's support for the province to issue the East Richmond ATV riders a letter of authority to assume management of the trail and to encourage trail users to work together on accessible and reasonable solutions. So that is the motion on the floor. And apologies, it has been seconded by Deputy Warden Sampson. So is there discussion on the motion? And we'll come back to Councillor Mumbercat if she'd like to say, but I'd like to open it up to others on the floor as well. Councillor Marchand?
Just have a question. You speak of 3 kilometers that starts at River Taylor. Where does it end? Is it by the canal?
Yeah, well, not all the way to the canal. No.
Close to the canal, okay.
Pretty close.
So it goes by the water. Is it all the way?
Bottom of Denny Street.
Denny Street, okay. Thank you.
Any other discussion on that motion? So in your package, additionally, I'm going to find it for you, is the letter that was written by, from the Warden's office on April 9th of 2021 to then Minister of Lands and Forests, Chuck Porter. Essentially, so that letter is on page 76 and 77 of your package, sorry, 75, 76. So essentially, it is a reaffirmation of that. Any other?
Was there a response to this?
No. I mean, there was a response indicating they received our communication.
No response.
Yes.
Oh, yes, right. April 21st, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So just a response of recognition that it was received. Yeah.
So, Councillor Mumbercat, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, I did also want to clear up some confusion because I have seen, of course, lots of, traffic on Facebook and all kinds of other places about this. I do want to clarify because I had seen some comments related to that section of trail being operated as a park trail. I confirmed with the province that the abandoned rail corridor was not operated as a park trail and has not been managed as a trail by them. So that is confirmation coming from the provincial government. They have done some maintenance, the removal of hazardous trees, and I think some leeway was given to local staff who had a particular passion for it to do some additional work, maybe place some benches, that type of thing, and we're very fortunate to have that kind of passion for the trail in our community. But there is no budget from the Parks Division for this trail, and the district office had no budget either, and there was next to no maintenance, very little maintenance prior to the work carried out in the fall of 2024. This is information I've received directly from the province, so I did want to kind of clarify that because I think there's been some misinformation in the public about it. And yeah, I also want to recognize that some folks left that open house that happened in January pretty frustrated because they were expecting a presentation and a chance to get up and be heard, but it was an open house style format. As you recall, councillors who were attending, there were stations set up and, it was a different type of consultation, but the survey was opened, I think, until middle of last week. And certainly, I'm encouraging people to continue to reach out to the province directly or reach out to me, and I'm happy to forward any of their concerns, regardless of my position. I will faithfully forward any of their concerns forward for consideration by the province in this. So.
And just by way of, making this a fulsome debate as much as possible, certainly I have seen recently and going back to 2021 concerns about it being a place where pedestrian or foot traffic would be quiet, and the shift in that would be something that people who used that. I do recall I saw articles about the concerns that people who need to keep their children, who need to be at least, more mindful perhaps of their children's safety because of challenges with behavior and whatnot. So there have been some concerns floated about that. And I believe those folks were at the, there's certainly people who believed that at the meeting. I will say I am a longtime Richmond resident, but I was also homeowner in Inverness County and lived in Lake Ainslie and spent many, many years, Frankie was brought him home from the hospital to Lake Ainsley, and we spent a good deal of time on those, the trails through Inverness County. And they are multi-use, and I can tell you that I felt safer there than I did in many facilities that were walking only. So I can tell you I'm safer. Frankie and I were safer at the multi-use trail than we were at the Park and Martinic. So, so there is certainly lots of interesting debate there.
Oh, so you speak there's no letter of authority given to anybody, but DNR has a trail section. Is it DNR that owns this land, the province? Yes. So they do nothing with this. So for many, many years, no one's really had any ownership other than DNR on this. DNR has done nothing other than some of their workers volunteering their time.
Yeah, okay. So, Councillor, that's essentially correct. I confirmed with them they have no budget from Parks Division for this trail. They don't consider it a trail. They've classed it as an abandoned rail corridor. We, in our community, consider it a trail because we know that pedestrians use it and it's much loved. But technically, because it's classed as an abandoned rail corridor, nobody has a mandate for maintenance, but not just maintenance, improvement. And I mean, the work that happened there last fall was pretty extensive because the trail was falling into the ocean. Yeah, and I provided some pictures of those sections, yeah.
They had them at the open house as well.
Yes.
And just by way of clarification, in terms of, it talks about a letter of support to the province, but this is one of those departments that has changed names. So it was Lands and Forests and is now Natural Resources. It was Resources and Renewables at one point, but it is the department that has changed its name, but that's the arm of the branch of government that's responsible. Any other CAO? Excuse me. Well, we'll vote on that, but
That's exactly what I
yeah.
was going to ask for clarity on who's writing the letter as part of the motion, because it doesn't say who's writing the letter. I just want to make sure.
Sure.
We're taking learnings from our last teaching with
Yes.
municipal affairs.
I believe that if, yeah, well, I believe any time where if council is, it would be the voice, through the voice of the warden, so. Yep. Any other discussion on the matter? Hearing none? None? I will call for a vote, and I'm going to read it again just so that there's clarification. Reaffirm council's, so the motion is to reaffirm council's support for the province to issue the East Richmond ATV riders a letter of authority to assume management of the trail and to encourage trail users to further to work together on accessible and reasonable solutions. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? That motion passes. So moving on to correspondence, there are no correspondence, items of correspondence that require our attention, our action, but there are 3 that require our attention. So the first is a letter that I wrote on January 13th. This was from an action item back in September, and I believe I spoke at Committee of the Whole to say that the motion that passed was to write a letter about opening closed roads, but following a meeting with the Fire Services Committee, it was narrowed down that they wanted this letter to specifically speak to the most important roads they were concerned about. So that letter is attached. Any questions on that motion? We discussed it at the last meeting. Councillor Marchand?
So this letter's been sent out to them.
It was moved. Yes, this is from a September council meeting. That was, but I believe September council meeting at the recommendation of the fire services, but there was some clarification from them about, and I'm glad. I wouldn't have wanted to write a letter saying, could you please open up all the closed roads? Right? So, the idea that they identified the 2 that were most pressing for them in terms of emergencies, it was.
Start with these 2.
That's right. That's what I put. So moving on to the next item, it's a letter from the Honorable Kim Maslin, Minister of Emergency Management, and the subject title is Moving Towards Consistent and Impactful Emergency Response. So for the folks at home, so they know we take this very seriously, and for the two non-committee members, I can let you know that the Municipal Emergency Management Advisory Committee will hold its first meeting in this new mandate on February 10th. So this will be one of the priorities for that meeting. Go ahead, Councillor Marchand.
So the previous one, you're sending it to this minister as well, Kim, which is kind of good. Yeah, she's CC'd on it as well. Works good with this.
Yes, I work very closely with our emergency measures officer.
Need to get yourself a snowmobile.
That's it. So our final correspondence to be considered is a letter from the Municipality of Chester regarding their concerns that they have interestingly copied to, I believe, all municipal units via this email and their MLA regarding their concerns about potential conflict with respect to the conflict code of conduct policy. So I don't know if anybody has any thoughts.
That's interesting.
Very, yeah. Yeah, I will confess that I have resigned from committees just in case. I find it to be a dicey kind of spot to be in. You know, it's just a concern, and we need to find our new normal, I guess. Yeah.
So that meeting was February what?
I'm sorry?
The meeting for the emergency, the previous one you just...
Oh, sorry. February 10th, yeah, and at our matrix meeting, the members of that committee are myself, Councillor Marbuquette, and Deputy Warden Sampson. Okay, so there is, the action items are attached to your report. Those are from page 83 to the last page, which is 187. Very...
I believe the deputy has some.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, yeah. I was just going to bring up a few that I just, and there is, I know in the attachment there is some good explanations. I just, partly for the public at home and just some clarification. I had a few of them. Number 275 Cans Point Road. It appears that the Cans Point Road was provincial, Cans Point Road extension was municipal. So from what I can gather from that, I think the municipal end of it's done, that sign's been changed. Have we heard anything from the province as to whether or not they've done their part or decided to change that as well?
If I may, Madam Chair, we got heads up this was coming. We went and followed all the loops and emails today to figure out where this sits, and the province has denied it based on the fact that there were 13 residents on the road and only 5 signed the petition. So the majority was not hit, and that was the basis that they denied it. So we'll take this back to PAC where this originated and let you guys reconsider what you want to do with that. But on those bases, the province has turned it down at this point. We just found that out today.
All right, thank you for that. And I'd be
275.
I might be surprised if there's actually 13, but I know some of those are seasonal, but yeah. Okay, thank you. 294, the Bell Alliant. That was about having somebody from Bell Alliant appear before council at some point, just for general service degradation over time.
So again, this one, because after that one was asked, then the public safety got in with the new towers coming in. And I checked with our regional guy with Bell and said, well, do you want to come in and talk to council at this point? And he thought, well, let's wait and see till the towers go up, see what the improvements are, and then we'll see what we need to do as the next steps. Because what's going up this year, we have 2 confirmed in Richmond County going up this year, net new ones, not replacement ones. There's 8 in total, but 2 net new ones going up this year, which should help. And but I reached out to Bell again and said, John, pretty sure that I'm going to be directed to ask you to come. So he is putting me in touch with, they have a person that deals with municipal government solely. So I now have her contact, and I will reach out to her and arrange for her to come and explain what their plans are in conjunction with public safety that deals with service and coverage degradation that we've seen over the last couple of years.
And that's great, because as much as the new towers will probably help in some of these areas that don't have service, I think, I'm only speaking for myself here, but I can assume I'm going to get some nodding heads that people have noticed over the last few years, and not just within Richmond County, within the province in general. Places that had, stable cell service 4 or 5 years ago do not seem to anymore, even when the towers haven't moved. Yeah.
So based on that, it is already a motion of council, so we need not make a new one, but we are certainly strongly encouraging us
forward
to
to that
make
person.
that happen. Yeah. And
Soon
did
as
you have
we can
another one?
arrange it, we'll have that person here.
Did you have another one? Yep.
This is the last one, I swear. Canada Post, which was a service issue as well, 396, so it was a little more recent. Just, I haven't had any complaints recently. That doesn't mean sometimes I don't hear about it. Yeah, well, yeah. However, I think we just wanted an opportunity to ask some questions because there had been several service interruptions throughout different parts of the county and what their plan was going forward. And
Well, and on the surface, it may be, well, there was a strike and there is potential for resuming that strike. But at the same time, I think that this is exactly the right time to have those conversations because it can help to inform the concerns that are being addressed through the negotiations. So, I think that it is actually not the time to take our foot off the gas on that one either. And I can just let folks know that item number 450, invitation to join the Rural Region 1 Solid Waste Committee, that we all said was a great idea, but then nobody put their hand up, so I want you to know I went. I'm learning. And if you would like to know anything about the impact of kitty litter on solid waste, I am the person you need to speak to.
No.
Ho, ho, ho.
Madam Chair, if I could, just in response to your deputy, I'm going to defer to Shelley just to give you the update that we do have from the post office folks.
Thank you. Through you, CEO and Warden, to Deputy Warden Brent Sampson. I do have a little bit of an update. It's a bit of a phone tag for a little bit, so I put in another service ticket order because you just can't directly phone them. You have to go through their online chat system. So I've done all that and I explained the situation again. And they're very apt to help us out. So they're supposed to respond by January 31st.
thank you.
Deputy, or Councillor Marchand, do you have a?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, you've been in contact with NSCC from what I hear?
Yes.
And how's that going?
This is regarding your population?
Yes, ma'am. Went really well. Went and met them in person over at the campus. Both Waddy and Jim, and we have a plan in place. They sent me back, I think I met them 2 weeks ago on a Friday. Did a little tour over there and met some of their students, and then they sent an email today with their proposal. I've asked them for some clarification on some of the grants because in addition to doing some of the work for the pellet survey, we may be able to get our hands on one of their students, and there's grants that we can apply for. So the sooner I know what grant and the timing, I'd like to line that up so that we can possibly go beyond the original scope and help one of these students with the summer job. And 2 of the students right now are right from Richmond County, so that would be awesome, right? So
I guess just another comment to that. I'm hearing that there's issues with deer in many other areas too. So,
oh, yes.
Maybe the study needs to be
Expanded. And that's what we were going to start with, the transects on Alma Dam, and then hopefully if we get the student, we could head to River Tiller, we could head out to other areas where the deer conflicts are just incredible.
Capital Street.
Yeah, right? Well, they're everywhere.
they're everywhere, yeah.
Actually, just to that point, Adam Cook, who's here with us today, one of the meetings I was interviewed, and they played that as part of a CVC information morning, and Steve Sutherland closed by saying that he had come to Almadam to visit Cape Laurent and hit a deer while he was here. So, okay, sure, go ahead. Go ahead, Columbo. Go ahead, but you got to push your.
No, he said one less deer.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said one more.
One less deer.
One less deer. Oh, sorry. I thought you had more item. Sure. Okay, so there are no items added to the agenda, so we'll take questions from the gallery or our very large gallery or our, sorry? Oh,
We're not
shoot.
live.
Yeah.
I just texted him. We're not live. He can't get
Okay, so questions from the gallery? Please do. Come on up. You got the whole time.
it. So
It's
it's at the server.
There's just you, I think.
Who let him in?
I think you have to press the button.
Yeah, I did. There we go. Well, I didn't expect to be back this soon. Yeah. What's this? Oh, yeah, look at that. Yeah, I was wondering about that. Yeah. Might happen anyway. So I'm here to speak about the motion that was just passed about the St. Peter's Coastal Trail. And while I respect council's intervention, it's not your decision. It is a Department of Natural Resources decision. And this is the fourth motion that council has passed in support of the ATVs going on that trail. There was one in 2010 by Councillor McNeil. There was one in 2017 by Councillor Boucher. The letter was signed by then Warden Marchand that went, and then the two recently. So, and it strikes me that I'm just wondering if there's another road to go down here with council, given that I think the province is downloading the Coastal Protection Act on the municipalities. So I wonder if you've reflected on the fact that you are now asking to take that responsibility away from a government department that owns this trail and that would be in charge of it if nobody else gets it. And so they would be responsible for looking after the erosion that is going to happen continuously, rather than, giving it to a user group that would have to fundraise to do that. Just wondering I understand the Coastal Protection Act is going to be downloaded to municipalities, and this is a large section of it, so therefore you might be opening up some kind of a funding thing that the taxpayers of Richmond County would have to look after the erosion on this trail and not the user group. Or certainly the Department of Natural Resources budget is considerably larger than the one we're sitting in, now, Richmond County.
I'd like to offer, I'll start. I'm sorry. No, you go ahead. Sorry, I thought you were.
Well,
Press the button again. Press it again, yeah. Sorry.
I'll check the mirror. Okay. And I also wonder if there isn't a compromise here. I'd like to know if the council would consider helping the ATV group come in the Oban Road. That's the road that they applied to use before, given that they first applied to go through right downtown St. Peter's from Denny Street, Bedore Lakes Inn up to Tim Hortons. And we all know that St. Peter's, as reported by the Parks Canada person that came to talk to us about the new bridge, he said that according to their statistics, St. Peter's had the most through traffic of any community in Cape Breton, save for Waikagam in the summer. So I think probably Department of Highways had a good reason to say that the ATVs could not go on Grenville Street from A to B that they first requested. But, however, that doesn't close down the possibility of them coming in the Oban Road and going to Pepperell Street. Down Pepperell Street, either behind the Lions Club to get to the new mall that's there, or to come to the community hub where the old Irving was. There's a parking lot there, and they could park there and avail themselves of all the services of town without driving on Grenville Street. I wonder if that's a possibility that's been explored. They were refused to come downtown, but they wanted to go on Grenville Street. That was refused. I'm just wondering if there was a backup application that went in to say, well, let's try something else. I'm sorry, almost finished. And it does bother me as somebody who walks the trail a lot that I don't think even if the St. Peter's Community Club was given the letter of authority, that we would be allowed to apply to Richmond County for funding. Because I think the policy states that you only give funding to multi-use trails. That's what's on the application I have. And you've given over $200,000 to ATV groups in this county. So I'm just wondering, where's the avenue for somebody who wants to operate a walking trail, some community, if they can't successfully apply to the county for other funds that ATVs are allowed to apply for. So I'd ask you to consider changing that. Furthermore, I mean, active transportation. You know, our neighbors, here's a clip from Antigonish. They're putting $1.6 million into the walking trails in Antigonish. Our neighbors to the west, Port Hawkesbury, $2.6 million into their trails. I mean, and these are walking trails. This is active transportation. This is for your mental and physical health. They're not motorized trails. So, I mean, where's the incentive for anybody in Richmond County to do that, if not on this trail? You know, there are miles and miles of ATV trails throughout Richmond County, a lot of it on private land. And I know because they've been crossing my family's land for over 50 years. My neighbor to the west of me was the first Skidoo dealer in St. Peter's, and his brother was my neighbor to the east. And every weekend they would just gather and come down our fields and go to one house or the other for a praski or whatever they called it back then on their Skidoos. I can tell you that we had the old tube teepee back then, and my brother and Charlie and I would be watching the hockey night in Canada, and Belleville would be on a breakaway, and the Skidoos would come over the hill. And in those days they had magneto generators, which had a big electrical field, and the TV would go all fuzzy. The old tubes would go, you know, and you'd wonder who the heck won, because when the TV came back, it would be Murray Westgate in his Imperial Oil uniform saying, always look to Imperial for the best, you know, and then Juliet would come on. And we wouldn't know who won the game until Monday morning when you get back to school, because there was no internet back then. I'm that old. Anyway, so there are miles and miles of trails back there. So I'd like to ask, why is it not possible for one trail to stay non-motorized? One that's been in the community and used by children, adults, pets, tourists for over 36 years. And to say that it's not maintained today is, they don't have a budget, but it has been maintained. Every time a tree fell down, DNR would go cut it up. They put $100,000 in Armorstone this year. They mowed it this year. Other people mow it. I mean, other communities would love to have an asset like this in their backyard. It comes down to a beach, a sandy beach. You can get sea glass. It goes by a tidal cove. It ends up on a riverbank. Just the variety of environmental landscapes one sees on this trail is unparalleled in around here. So I thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I know the motion has been passed. But, like I say, we'll see if the fourth time is lucky.
Right, yeah, and so there was a lot in there, and so I fear that we might be jumping around a little bit in our response, but we'll do the best we can. So I'll start, and then I throw it out to anybody else who'd like to respond. So just a couple of things. First, and I apologize, my notes are scribbled, so I'm not going to be answering anything in order. I acknowledge that. To your point about the grants policy and walking groups, I think that's a very important point. And so I would ask the clerk to make note of that concern, because we, as you may have heard, have committed to revisiting our grants policy. And I think that that's an important issue for us to bring up at that discussion. So on that point, agree, and that is right. I do want to say that I have been following the conversations, and I am a family member of an ATV rider, and so I know one of the concerns that, as somebody on Almadam can certainly speak to, is that there are miles and miles of ways for you to get around Almadam. I am one of the people that signs off on folks traveling on my land, but I can also say that there are concerns emerging because we've had people who have moved into the community who have said, yes, my land, because as you know, in Almadam, the land goes back just long, skinny strips, right? And somebody with a long, skinny strip said, no more. Something you would never have been able to see or hear. They wouldn't destroy your hockey game. They're just so far back in the woods it wouldn't matter. But they said no more because I said so. And so the entire trail system collapses as soon as somebody says no to that. So we may on one day have an ATV trail that is a viable alternative to get from point A to point B, but one landowner can upset that pretty quickly. So that is a concern, I think. I do want to be really clear. At no point would I, nor has this council in this mandate, suggested that this be an ATV-only trail. So this is a multi-use. And I think one of the reasons, I will speak for myself, one of the reasons I am very comfortable about that is because although you have referenced walking trails in different parts of the province, we don't live very far from the trail that goes from the Canso Causeway all the way up to Inverness and across Waikagama through Mabu all the way up to Inverness. And those are multi-use and have been used as somebody who has only ever hiked there and hiked there with a child who needed to be considered for safety reasons. And ATV use has been very, prominent on that trail, and it has been done safely. So I don't want to suggest that we're considering this as an ATV trail. It is intended to be a multi-use trail, in fairness. And around the coastal protection, I take your concerns certainly. I bet you there's nobody in this room not concerned about what coastal protection and the lack of government, provincial government jurisdiction means. I guess I am concerned that an abandoned corridor, and to Councillor Mombercat's point, using the term as an official Department of Highways term, there is no reason for anybody to pay for that. If DNR says, let her go, then there is no reason for that to be repaired. So the idea that that would fall to the municipality, it is very well that nobody takes ownership and so nothing happens to it and it just goes. So I don't think we're on the hook to do that because I think government would be perfectly fine to see that disappear. So those are my thoughts, but I'll pass that on, and I'm very jumbled, so I apologize, but I'll pass that on to anybody else if they have any concerns or anything they'd like to say. Go ahead.
Thank you, Warden, and thank you, Claire. And I hear you, and I know that many people left that session feeling like their voice hadn't been heard. But we all had an equal opportunity to have our voices heard or not heard. That's at that particular session. There was a survey that's gone out, and I really am committed to making sure that if there are comments coming from the public, that I'm forwarding them on to the province. So I did I think 2 or 3 of those today. I would agree with the Coastal Protection Act concerns. There's some uncertainty for everyone in that right now. But I do agree with the warden. Without a letter of authority to someone, we will lose this trail. I don't think the timing of the consultant session this month was an accident, that it happened just on the heels of the big investment that they did. It's because it was a wake-up call. They've been sitting on this LOA discussion for quite some time, and I think everybody, I think finally there's been an awakening that something's got to give or else we will lose the trail. And I agree with you with that variety of environmental landscapes. It's beautiful. I mean, we need to protect it. So I agree. I think we agree on more things than we disagree on. The one thing I would say about the backup plan of coming up Pepperell and whatever, again, if you're going to access other places, you're going to be again relying on private landowner agreements, you know what I mean, potentially, depending on how things move. It's very, it's busy, whereas the coastal trail takes us on the backside of the village. So, I just don't think that that's a sustainable option, but it will not be up to me to decide that. At the end of the day, we know they put an application in. It was declined for Share the Road and for the reasons you stated, Claire. But at the end of the day, this coastal trail provides us with a viable option, and its history as a rail corridor lends itself really well to specifically, upgrading the surface to that standard that I talked about in my memo to council. And in terms of the multi-use trails only in policy, I'm glad we're making a note of that. But I do have to say, I'm okay with that priority, and I know that maybe we'll have to agree to disagree on this, but I'm okay with it because it helps us reach the most number of people in our county. It helps us improve conditions for pedestrians, for ATVers, for cyclists, for a large swath of people. And we have very limited financial constraints. So to me, once we get a really strong multi-use backbone, then I would probably be more supportive of investing in mountain biking trails, investing in walking-only trails. We've got a whole system of walking trails at Battery Park, not far, right, from the coastal trail. So, I guess I just wanted to address some of those because I do understand the concerns. My vision in a perfect world is that we can, that I know there's people in the community who feel that this has been dividing community. It does not need to be that way. If we came together in some open dialogue and, established maybe an advisory committee to help set advice on rules like they have in the coastal trail in Inverness, on the etiquette, on activities that could be programmed that would be maybe sensory friendly activities. I mean, there's a lot of options there for us, but right now our options are really limited and the trail's at risk. So that's the only, I guess, comment I would add to that. So thank you.
Anyone else? Go ahead.
I'm bringing this up without remembering the specifics of how this worked. You may recall, but I'm pretty sure we had a mechanism for funding trails that, outside of multi-use, because I feel as if we did help out some with the Irish Cove project, with that walking trail.
It was a grant, yeah, it was a different type of grant.
There was a different thing.
Strategic initiative.
Okay, it may have been, yeah. So there was an avenue, but maybe updating of the policies is in order too. I definitely don't want to leave those out because Irish Cove's a perfect example of it's a smaller area. It's not necessarily, it wouldn't be a connector the same way for ATV use, and I think there is place for other types.
Oh, actually, I'll ask. Sorry, yeah. Go ahead.
These mics. Yeah, I was going to mention about that type 5. But Claire, you spoke of not being able to get grants, but what would you be accessing it for? Who owns the trail? It's DNR?
Yes.
So as a community group, you can just go in and you'd look for money to upgrade their trail?
No, it would depend on who gets the LOA, the letter of authority.
Or just, hit your...
That one takes a while to pop on.
Oh. Could you repeat the question, please? Oh.
Now he's going to switch to that camera.
Sorry, I didn't understand.
No, okay, it's been many years that this trail has not been looked after. I guess last fall or whenever, DNR finally looked after it, or the province. You asked about community groups not being able to get money for a walking trail. But since no one has any control over that, or no one that we're aware, the ATV club doesn't, and the community group that I believe you're part of doesn't, what would you be asking money for? Just to go and make a walking trail on, we don't know who owns it.
Well, it would depend on who gets the LOA. If the St. Peter's Community Club was the recipient of the letter of authority to look after the trail, that's why we would be looking for funds. Simply like the $200,000 that was given out to the ATV clubs for trail enhancement, I expect. Same things. It's just different hat. Yeah.
And I think to that point, if a walking group got a letter of authority for this trail or any other space, we would not want our policies to be prohibitive for that, is my point. So, did you have something to add to your points?
Just a question. So, I'm assuming that the community group has put in a request to have this LOA or whatever as well, isn't it?
Yes, we applied in 2017 and haven't heard a thing since. We were the first ones to apply for the LOA back then. It's a long wait, but I mean, it's kind of a fallacy to say it hasn't been maintained. I mean, they have maintained it. They've cut trees. They haven't done large amounts of work, but anytime a tree fell down, the crew would go and clear the trail. They cut 35 trees down this spring because there was a lot of deadfall. They mowed it once this year. Somebody else mows it the rest of the time. They have mowed it for over 30 years. So, it has been maintained. It's not all falling into the ocean.
Well, I apologize.
Okay.
Anyone else? No? Go ahead.
Yeah, so Claire, again, I did receive confirmation. DNR's position is that they are not maintaining it. They will clear those trees. Like you said, the deadfall, I think that's from a liability perspective,
no doubt.
right? So, right, exactly. But it's not the same as having a long-term plan for the trail. And the other thing I wanted to mention about the way we funded the Johnstown grant, the Johnstown Trail, was through our grants money, right? It didn't come through I think we allocate like $40,000 a year or something like that for trail, multi-use trails. So it was a different pot of funding. So I guess to clarify, it's not that there's no way to fund other types of trails, but it would just come from a different pot of money. But it's still a good flag, and I think something we should be talking about. Thank you.
So happy to have had that exchange because we are unable to take questions from the public tonight, unfortunately. So seeing there's no further business on tonight's agenda, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Drive safe, everyone. I think we're in good shape.